If you don't work in journalism, you might not be aware that there's a crisis in the industry, not just of business model, but of purpose. However, an alternative has emerged, is emerging. The ideas in it are not new, but they are, I think, aligning for the very first time. And one word sums up what is happening. Hi, my name's Adam. Welcome to the channel. Today's going to be a bit different. It's going to be a bit more of a podcast where I'm just going to talk through ideas rather than giving practical tips. Journalism faces a whole bunch of challenges right now. The collapse of traditional business models that relied basically heavily on advertising revenue, which obviously got diverted towards digital platforms. Well, that led to a lot of financial instability, job losses, I would say a reduction in quality reporting. Then you get sensationalism, you get the whole clickbait, driving traffic thing. And now AI looks set to extend that kind of hunt for optimization even further. And then simultaneously, there's a growing public loss of trust in journalism. People just don't really trust journalists anymore. And this is kind of driven by perceived biases, some real biases, of course, a general ecosystem of misinformation. And I think the prioritization of profit over public service. I think journalism has a lot to answer for with regards to its own apparent demise. However, there are a lot of ideas in journalism right now. These are not necessarily new ideas. In fact, some of them are decades old. But for the first time, I think they're aligning in one place, and they center around one idea: degrowth. Degrowth is a concept that challenges the constant push for economic growth, which often leads to human exploitation and environmental harm. It promotes the idea that societies should focus on well-being and sustainability rather than profit and overconsumption. In general, the movement advocates for a fairer distribution of resources, reducing the scale of economic activities and embracing values like care and community and independence. The goal of the degrowth movement is to create societies that are environmentally just and provide a good quality of life for everybody within the limits of this planet that we live on. So degrowth journalism then is not just a rejection of kind of clickbait and extractive business models, but is actually an embrace of these ideas of care and community and independence. It's a movement that aligns with these ideas of growth, and I think opens up a whole new era for journalism. And I think there are 8 core principles behind it. One of the core principles behind degrowth journalism is, of course, quality over quantity, and a focus on in-depth, often investigative reporting, often quite slow journalism, as it might be called, rather than a superficial spray gun of content that's designed to get as many eyeballs as possible and is designed for notification screens on apps. Part of this is also about collaboration with other newsrooms and experts, working together with other people and other groups outside of the newsroom to produce things that are genuinely useful for people. The second hallmark of degrowth journalism might be environmental sustainability. And by this, of course, I mean minimizing the carbon footprints that journalists use, thinking about, offices and travel and all of that kind of thing. But it's also about repurposing and reusing spaces and resources that are already out there to do journalism. That might be a abandoned bookshop. It might be a set of guides that were already written by an NGO that people think would be useful. But of course, it also means acknowledging climate change for what it is, which is an emergency, and reporting on it as such, making sure that climate is not some kind of thing that's hidden away at the back of the newspaper, but is a theme that cuts through every single article, every single bit of reporting that we do. Social equity and inclusion is obviously a huge part of this, and something journalism has not been very good at, or has been afraid to admit that they want to do. Degrowth journalism has a strong commitment to representing underrepresented communities and diverse people in the newsrooms, not just bringing them in to interview them, but also making them a core part of those teams. It also strives to make journalism more accessible, and that might be thinking about the kind of paywall side of things. It might be thinking about the way that we write articles, where we share those articles, maybe not even articles at all. Maybe this is about running events and community projects. The fourth pillar is really about being local first. This is about meeting people where they are, giving them the information and the tools they need to make changes in their lives and communities. And therefore, it's not just about highlighting issues, but it's about being solutions driven and giving them a way to have agency over the lives that they lead in the places where they lead them. Which brings me nicely on to number 5, which is community engagement. So really, what degrowth journalism prioritizes is facilitating participatory relationships with people and communities. It moves beyond transactional interactions, thinking of users or customers or even audiences, to be honest. And it encourages community involvement, not just as a kind of reader or viewer or passive consumer of content, but actually people who shape the news agenda, create the news agenda, reflect on the news agenda with journalists. A foundational principle of degrowth, and therefore degrowth journalism, is this idea of economic resilience, that news organizations need to explore funding that goes beyond a single source like advertising to reduce reliance and risk. And they'll look at different structures to do this, whether that's a B Corp or a non-profit. The whole idea is to align the financial practices of the organization with a mission of sustainability and resilience. That also includes any investments that they might be using, banking services that they might be using, making sure that staff get paid properly. All of those things are really important to degrowth journalism. Number 7 is digital rights. This is absolutely key, and there's a really exciting new movement around this at the minute. Degrowth journalism puts people in charge of their own data, and newsrooms facilitate the obtaining, the understanding, the kind of brokering of people's own data. Degrowth journalism organizations use people's data fairly and transparently, not relying on murky third-party platforms where possible. It's important to remember that degrowth journalism is still journalism, and at the heart of that is a commitment to accuracy, transparency, and high ethical standards. Journalism needs to avoid sensationalism, avoid clickbait, and reinforce its pillar as a core tenet of democracy. So those are the 8 principles of degrowth journalism. I think it's a growing and evolving list. I've had great feedback already on what should be included. One of the interesting things is that where this is resonating is outside of journalism, is people who are involved in politics, design, urban architecture, community practices, and the environmental and eco movements as well. So I think there's something happening across a range of disciplines here that's really, really exciting. I also realized from a personal perspective, this is kind of a manifesto of sorts for my work. This is really the types of organizations that I work with and want to work with are practicing these principles, and my job is essentially to help them get there. It's about looking at all of this holistically. It's about understanding that you can't just do one of these things, but you really have to think about the others as well. And not just because it won't work, but actually if you bring these all together, you get a kind of flywheel effect, a hub and spoke effect, where the entire organization is aligned around a single goal and vision and purpose, from business model through to the actual stories and reporting, through to the way that you market to people, through to the way that you deal with staff and hire teams. Everything is aligned. The word degrowth has its roots in the French, la décroissance, and this is the concept of a river returning to its original course after a big flood, because that's what's happening. That is what needs to happen. The flood is receding, the waters are ebbing back. This is the era of creators and builders and makers and doers. We need to give them the keys, we need to give them the platforms, we need to get out of the building. We need to abandon all of our assumptions and a lot of our snark. We need to listen and observe. We need to start small things and be prepared to shut them down. Embrace experiments, share generously, be vulnerable, celebrate retracement. That should be a victory, not a defeat. Because this is bigger than journalism. This is about building a world where we can all live together. This is about communities that are tolerant and understanding and thriving. To this point, we have the maps, we have the boats, we have no more excuses. It's time to act. These are not new ideas, but our time has come. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you've enjoyed this, please like, subscribe, drop a comment maybe. Tell me what you think of degrowth journalism. Have you got any great examples of degrowth journalism? How can we expand this definition? It's an idea that I've been really enjoying toying around with and loving to see the reaction of. If you like the music in this video, that's mine. If you're interested in learning how to get funding for your organization who might be practicing degrowth principles, I've written a free course about that, so you can head down to the links below and see that. Take care of each other. I'll see you again soon.